Welcome. My name is David Kerr and I'm Consultant Director of Education at Young Citizens in the UK. This is the second in a series of 4 videos looking at teaching controversial issues in the classroom. And in this video we're going to focus on 2 key questions, building from the first video. First, how can we get teacher students acquainted with the term teaching controversial issues, or TCI? And second, how can we develop their capacity to work with controversial issues? I'm going to be offering some example activities that I hope you can use, because they've been successfully used with teacher students to provide answers to both questions in many countries across Europe. So first off, how can we get teacher students acquainted with the term teaching controversial issues? Well, I think the main thing to understand is the context within which teacher students are working. They're in their initial training phase, and therefore they've got limited or no practical experience of teaching children and young people to draw upon, and their confidence as practitioners may be low and fragile. They may also be having heightened fears around the kind of concerns we talked about in video 1. Their practice in the classroom, their ability to keep the class under control if they tackle controversial issues, how they manage that discussion and debate without polarizing or antagonizing people, their lack of knowledge around particular controversies, and fears that there will be complaints, so their reputation as a trainee teacher may suffer if students complain or other teachers complain or parents complain to the head teacher of the school. So there's a whole range of things holding them back there. So my advice is to keep things simple in planning and conducting follow-up training with teacher students. And in doing this, I've found that these kind of things work. So spend time understanding them, the nature of their training courses, the context within which they're carrying out their teaching placements. Stress the benefits of teaching controversial issues in terms of the competencies they're going to develop in students, the skills, knowledge, attitudes and behaviours that are going to help them to better deal with controversies and the life around them, so they see a purpose. Model good practice in your own training about how you expect them to behave in training exercises. Provide lots of opportunity for reflection and questioning. Signpost where they can get further support and advice, because they're going to need that. Set up a practical follow-up task to give them something to actually do and aim at. Offer them follow-up training sessions, and make the training challenging but also fun, so that they actually learn together as they move along. So in relation to the second question, how do we get teacher students acquainted with it? How do we develop their capacity to work with controversial issues? There are a whole series of activities that we put together that have worked with teacher students and also with teachers right the way across Europe. And these include: review current media images. Get the teacher students to collect a few images of recent controversies in Europe, including those involving school-aged children, such as the climate change protest I showed in video 1. And then get the teacher students in pairs and then in groups to identify what makes an issue such as those in the images controversial, and arrive at a definition, and perhaps to relate that to the definition that we actually covered in video 1, which they are issues which arouse strong feelings and divide opinions in community and society. And get them then to consider the implications of how they might handle these controversies in the classroom with students. The second activity is one known as hot or cold. So you get the teacher students to individually or in groups draw up a list of some current controversial issues and write them onto post-it notes or sticky notes, and then get them to place them along the line in terms of the degree of controversy they have for teachers to teach about them. So on the left-hand side of the line, there'll be issues which they think are very hot or controversial. They'd be incredibly challenging to teach. Things might get heated, things might get out of control. In the middle are somewhat controversial. They'd be okay to teach, but they would still bring some controversy. In the right-hand column would be not very controversial. So they're still a controversial issue, but they're not as challenging to teach, perhaps because they're more accepted in society. And then ask them to discuss in groups where they've put those issues on that line, hot, lukewarm or cold, and what factors made them categorise each controversial issue. Because what you may well find is that there are disagreements amongst people about their categorisations. One student may have an issue as very hot to handle, whereas another one may think it's lukewarm, or another one that it's actually cold to teach. And then get the discussion then to think about what challenges do different issues pose in the classroom and why. That's quite a fun activity to actually get them working in groups and realise that people can have different opinions and different approaches to how they approach controversial issues. The second one is to get them to think about, now you've got them interested in controversial issues, is get them to think about what stance they should take when they're actually teaching controversial issues. What stance should the teacher students take? And we found in our research with teachers across Europe that there are 6 stances that a teacher should take. And there are 3 of them on this card. And then there are also 3 of them here. And what this allows them to do is to think about the pros and cons of each stance. What are the advantages and disadvantages of being a teacher? And what you end up is recognising that in the end, teachers use all these approaches. They've kind of got a repertoire of practical teaching approaches in handling controversy that they can take immediately into their teaching. And this repertoire is greatly appreciated by those learning to be effective teachers. Another thing to be thinking about is the use of stories. This is a fictitious story about a conflict between 2 groups of people in a rural community about where to build a first school and who should attend. And it's very good at showing how stories, fables and role-playing can be used to help teacher students to diffuse sensitive issues. And it's called distancing. You take them out of a current context and take them into one that's fictitious. Another one about dealing with insensitive and appropriate remarks in the classroom is forum theatre. You get students to role-play this in groups. Some teacher students are in the role of the teacher, and then you get other teacher students in the role of pupils. You maybe get 3 as the role of teachers. You give them an insensitive remark which a student has made. You get them to come in front of the teachers who are pupils and to explain how they would respond to it. And then each teacher students, the teacher comes in turn and says how they would respond to it. And then the group vote on the best teacher responses. And then you can alternate the roles. And that's really good for developing confidence in teachers about how to deal with their fears, their collective fears about spontaneous and insensitive remarks from students. And finally, you can get them to introduce their own learning activities, to plan a learning activity in themselves as part of their classroom teaching, maybe to think about how they can do something on controversial issues as part of pupil voice in the school, or plan an activity around controversial issues to involve the community. It doesn't always have to be in the classroom. Then having planned it and taught it, they can then come back and review with you the knowledge and skills they need to do this and the further support and training that they'll actually need as well. So I hope you found this information useful and that these training activities are really helpful in you helping your training with the teacher students on teaching controversial issues. And finally, as I said on the first video, I wish you good luck with sharing your learning and your experience. Take care and thank you very much.